Hi friends, I'm Nicholas Acciani. Let's talk backstage. Today, I want to talk to you about types of lumber we use in theater. Now, when I say that, I know what initially comes to mind is like mahogany or oak or maple, and I'm not really talking about those types of lumber. Generally in theater, we're building with less expensive materials and then painting it to look like those specific types of wood. So when I talk about lumber, the types of lumber, I'm talking about sheet lumber and dimensional lumber. So let's talk about dimensional lumber, which is also known as stick lumber. Dimensional lumber refers to a soft lumber, for example, pine or fir, that's used for framing and basic structural building. You might have heard at some point 1x3 or 2x4 or 4x4. That's all dimensional lumber. Now it comes in sticks, one long piece, giant sticks of wood. That's where it gets its name from. Generally, these are sold in varying lengths from 4 feet to 16 feet, usually increasing by 2. So you can get a piece of 1x3 that is 4 feet long, 6 feet long, 8 feet long, depending on what you need it for. Now, the nominal size is the named size. It is not the actual size of this lumber, and that is because of how it's made. A piece of 1x3 is cut into a piece that is 1 inch by 3 inches by however many feet long, and then after it is plain, smooth, and dried out, it shrinks down to its actual size, which is 3/4 of an inch by 2.5 inches. There are charts that you can go and memorize to know the actual size of every piece of stick lumber, but it's easier to think about it like this. The side that is 1, so 1x3, 1x4, 1x2, 1x6, the actual size of the one side is 3/4 of an inch. It is 1/4 of an inch smaller. That's how much it shrinks or gets planed down. So if it is more than 1 and less than 8, so 2 to 6, 1x2, 1x3, 1x4, 1x6, then that number is 1/2 an inch smaller. So 1x2 is actually 3/4 of an inch by 1.5 inches. 1x4 is 3/4 of an inch by 3.5 inches. There's a pattern there. When you get into the larger numbers, 8 to 12, it goes down by 3/4 of an inch. So 1x8 is really 3/4 of an inch by 7.25 inches. This is important to know because when you're building and when you're drafting, you need to take into account the size of that lumber, and if you go and count that one side as a full inch, then you are going to actually be smaller than what it actually should be because you're not accounting for the actual size. You're accounting for something slightly larger. So that is dimensional lumber. Now let's talk about sheet lumber, which we use to face or cover a flat and deck or put on top of a platform as the flooring. The standard size for sheet lumber that it comes in is 4 feet by 8 feet. Now you can also get 2x4, 2x2, 4x4, but the standard is 4 feet by 8 feet, which is also why that's the standard size for a platform or a flat. Plywood. Plywood is the most common sheet lumber. Plywood is a strong, thin wood that is made up of very thin layers glued together. If you look at the grain of the wood, the layers, they alternate the grain. That helps it keep from breaking. So in theater, we use a very thin type of plywood called luan, that's anywhere from 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, to face flats to put on our walls. Because it's not heavy, we can move it around, and it's pretty sturdy, so it'll last a while. We use 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch for the decking or the flooring on our platforms. Other types of sheet lumber. You have MDF or medium density fiberboard, or as it's known, mighty dense. Simply put, MDF is wood fibers that are ground down into tiny little fiber pieces and pressed together with a wax and resin binder under high temperatures to create this nice, smooth piece of lumber. This is generally used in theater for props, for very specific scenic pieces that need that smooth finish because it doesn't have the grain. You won't ever see that. It is just very heavy because it is so dense. Next up, we have masonite. This is a type of hardboard. It is made of steam cooked and pressure molded wood fibers in a process that has been patented by William H. Mason. It's not very flexible. It's also not very sturdy, so we're not using it for decking, but generally this has one side that has a smooth, slick finish and another side that is a little rough and corrugated. Because one side is so slick and finished, it's very commonly used to finish that top layer of the floor of the stage. Then we have homosote. This is made very similarly to paper mache, where it is a bunch of paper and wood fibers compressed in a high temperature and high pressure with glue. And this is kind of a flimsy material, but because of the material that it is made out of, what it is great for is muffling sound. So generally, you'll build a platform with 3/4 ply, then you'll put a layer of homosote on it, then the masonite to finish it off, and you won't have this big echo when people are walking around on raised platforms. And now we have particle board. This is not really used in building for theater, but the reason that I include it in this whole list is because it is what IKEA furniture is made out of. And it is compressed wood chips and resin that's usually covered in some sort of veneer. If you've ever broken a piece of IKEA furniture and there's just like those chippy pieces that fall out, that's what particle board is made out of. It is inexpensive, which is why a lot of Target and IKEA furniture is made that way, but it is not something that is easy to work with. so we don't see it a lot in building from scratch in theater. Now we also have OSB, or oriented strand board. It's the flaky wood that almost looks like a visualizer. So it's a type of engineered wood similar to plywood, except because instead of sheets, it's larger chips that are glued and compressed together in specific orientations, thus oriented strand board. We might use this to build platforms that we're definitely going to put Homosote and Masonite on top of, because we're saving a little bit of money by not using 3/4 ply. We're using 3/4 OSB, and it's pretty much just as strong. It just doesn't have as nice of a finish. So we do have to put something on top of it. I've used it in theaters to build things that I'm definitely going to be covering, because generally the shows that I have to build my own sets on, I don't have a big budget. So I'm trying to get more bang for my buck. And lastly, we have one of my favorite things to work with, which is sculpted skins. If you walk down in Lowe's or Home Depot, you can usually find a brick or a stonework that's a 4x8 sheet. These materials are made from Homosote or Masonite, and they're pressed with a mold. So they're pressed to look like brick, and then sometimes they come repainted, sometimes not. There are a couple companies that make this out of Homosote, so it's a little bit lighter, and they have interlocking teeth. This is actually very common on television sets to use this because it gives dimension, so it takes the light. You're not having to paint a backdrop, you're not having to paint each individual brick. It already has the shape and the texture. And especially in smaller theaters where the audience is closer, it adds a little bit of realism to it because you have that dimension. It's not a 2D thing that we're painting to look 3D, it's an actual 3D piece. So those are the different types of lumber that we use in theater. Again, lumber meaning stick lumber and sheet lumber, not specific types of wood, but types of lumber that wood is cut into. And that's all for types of lumber that I have. Hopefully you learned something, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time. Bye, friends. These videos are made for educational purposes. Hopefully you learned something or reinforced something you may already know. Now, this is just one way to do this, and there may be other ways to do what I've explained in this video, and I would love to hear about those ways in the comments. Just remember to be kind as you share your own experiences and expertise on the subject. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, like, and subscribe, and hit that little bell button to be notified of the next video.